Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Finding Yourself Again, where we focus on hope, healing, and recovery from toxic narcissistic abuse. Ultimate goal is to establish self-love, healthy relationships, and ultimately find you. My name's Don Trey. I'm a survivor of toxic abuse from a narcissist/borderline. And if you find these videos to be helpful to you, I ask that you subscribe, like, share, and watch any other videos on my channel that may be helpful to you. I ain't gonna hold y'all up, so with that being said, let's get into today's video. Alright, everybody. Happy Saturday. I hope everybody's doing good, taking care of yourselves. I got another video today. Today's topic is going to be, what is codependency? This is a good one, man, and it's a must. It's a must-need one that I needed to drop, man. So it's kind of late where I'm at here in Cali. I mean, it ain't late. It's only 8, but the sun's going down, so I'm trying to knock this video out while the sun's still out and get to some other things that I gotta get doing for the rest of my day. So first off, we're gonna go over the definition of codependency. It's a pattern of unhealthy relationships where a person excessively relies on another person for their sense of self-worth, identity, and emotional needs, characterized by a strong need to be needed, usually leading to taking responsibility for others' feelings, problems, and choices while neglecting their own needs and well-being. Codependent people often have difficulty setting healthy boundaries and may stay in dysfunctional relationships despite the negative impact on themselves. So that's the definition of codependency itself. So next, we're going to talk about the relation to toxic abuse or trauma, right? So codependency often develops as a survival mechanism to early childhood trauma, neglect, or dysfunctional family systems where boundaries were blurred, needs weren't met, or abuse or addiction was present. All negatives. For children growing up in these environments, it can teach them that their needs are secondary to others, that their worth is tied to pleasing others or caring for others, and that healthy boundaries are unsafe or non-existent. Toxic abuse, whether emotional, verbal, or physical abuse, often creates codependent patterns in the victim. Abusers often exploit the codependent person's need to please and caretake, creating a dynamic where the abused person prioritizes the abuser's needs above their own. And it says the inconsistency and emotional volatility of abuse can also lead the codependent to become hypervigilant to the abuser's moods and needs, trying to anticipate and prevent further abuse constantly, which creates a cycle of dependence where the abused person feels trapped and responsible for the abuser's behavior. So that was kind of a lot right there, and I'm not even done reading it. There's a little bit more that I gotta read. So it also says, trauma in general can disrupt healthy attachment patterns and lead to a fear of abandonment, which is why most people are afraid to leave or are walking on eggshells. And it says codependency can then develop as a way to maintain connection, even if that is unhealthy, stemming from a deep-seated fear of being alone or unloved. And that is something that I think that I had resonated with, when I was like learning about codependency over time. I would say this is actually the most that I've went into detail about codependency in specific, which is actually good because I knew basically, like, I knew a lot about this already, but the more that I looked into it as I was going through the notes for this video, I was it's just interesting how you really resonate with things and and things, they just really make sense to you. You know what I mean? And this is something that really makes a lot of sense to me. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is my experience with codependency briefly. This has played a huge, significant role in my life. Developed in my early childhood due to multiple reasons. If you're interested in more and to know the story about that, you could watch my story. It's on this channel, and it goes into more detail about, you know, my trauma, and then I have my story about the toxic abuse with my borderline slash narcissistic partner. So you could check those out if you're more interested. I'm not gonna go over all the nuances and all the details and everything in this video, but like I said, if you're interested, go ahead and check that out. But through healing, I've learned that codependency for mostly all of us begins early on due to life experiences, typically negative ones, right? The narcissist or toxic person may have sparked this trauma, and you will most likely see after you end the relationship and start healing. For me, I instantly knew the feeling that I had was similar to an early trauma that I experienced when I was 10 years old. I instantly knew that I instantly knew then that I was dealing with an unresolved issue from my past. You know, so, and one of the main, and I knew that it was one of the main contributors to my codependency. And obviously there was others, you know what I mean? But the point is to find your why. Think about your whys. What are the biggest significant things that have caused you trauma in your life? And these are going to be things that are not hard to remember. Like, you know what I mean? These are definitely things that you are going to remember. They're going to be hurtful, painful times, scary times, times you felt fear, you know, times you felt abandoned, stuff like that, you know. So you're really going to have to think back on that. You know, I can't tell you your personal story. That's something that you have to dig within, and you know, it may help to go over this with the therapist as well. You know, that it might be better to do that. But for me, after I got out of the relationship, it was interesting because the feeling of abandonment that I had felt was, and it was so weird because it was like a feeling that I knew I had to do and deal with, because I knew that I couldn't be with that person anymore, right? And I knew it was toxic and it was harmful to me, and I knew I had to get away from it. But it still hurt. I still didn't want to. It was still traumatic, being in it and to leave, you know. So it was a big it inflicted a real big injury on me, you know. And what it did was it brought out that codependency. It reminded me of a past time, a past trauma that I had when I was 10. And it's interesting that I remember being in therapy and talking about this with, when I was just going to free therapy at this time. So it wasn't like as official, right? But it was therapy, and I remember talking with my therapist, and even telling family at the time and loved ones, like, man, I never have felt like this since I was 10 years old, and I had got taken by my parent, and, you know, basically ended up living with that parent for almost 10 years. So, you know, if you're interested, you could check that out, like I said. But so I realized that that had sparked a trauma, and I knew that it was something that I was going to need to face and address, and something that was going to require, like, healing for sure, but also intense treatment. And I also wanted to address this. The codependency is working both ways. You know, when you get into a toxic relationship, it's like that person is meeting your needs, and you're meeting that person's needs, the abuser's needs. So it's a toxic relationship in general. It's not really, you know, at one point there was a time where I'd be like pointing the finger and, you know, it's your fault, and you know, or, you know, it's your fault, you know. But at the end of the day, I'm not really, I am more focused on solution. I'm more solution focused, healing focused, getting here to there. I'm not focused on who we're going to blame on the way or whatever, because that doesn't matter. That's not going to help you to heal, right? So what point does it matter wasting your time on blaming this or that? So I think it's more beneficial to just focus on healing, and also understand that the toxic person or the abuser that you were with, you were meeting their needs and they were meeting your needs too. It was going both ways. Now, I'm not saying that what they were doing that was harmful is excusable, or that it was cool for them to hurt you or whatever because it's a toxic relationship. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that try to look at it from a different lens, from the real lens, instead of just looking at it from a scorned lens or a hurt lens, or, a spiteful one. So, the narcissist or toxic person may have sparked this trauma, and you will most likely see after you end the relationship and start healing. So next, I'm going to go over some key points to understand codependency. So these are, how I went over the narcissistic traits? Well, these are codependency traits, so this one is interesting because I never really figured that I would be doing a video where I actually have, like the condition or the tendency or whatever, the characteristics of what I'm talking about. Because generally when you make content like this and you're making content about a narcissist or a toxic person, usually you're trying to push that as far from you as you can, right? Like, I'm not a toxic person, that's not me, this person is, and I understand that. But I think that realization and self-awareness is key, and it is the beginning of change. It is the beginning of greatness. And eventually codependency was going to be addressed. What did you think? You thought I wasn't going to call you out? No, this ain't for that. I'm calling y'all out, man. You codependent mother effers, you. No, but look, man, codependency, the good thing about it, we're going to come to find out in a sec. I don't want to spill the beans, but codependency, it's not the worst thing to have. It's not the worst thing to have. So let's get into it. So if you have these or most of these, you can consider yourself codependent. But judge yourself, according to your own self-awareness, obviously. So the first one is going to be a focus on others' needs. Codependents prioritize the needs, feelings, and problems of others to the detriment of their own. So that's the first one. The next one is going to be difficulty setting boundaries. Saying no or enforcing personal limits feels incredibly difficult or even impossible. So that's going to be the next one, difficulty setting boundaries. Next is going to be need to control. Often try to control others or situations, believing they know what's best for everyone. That one sounded kind of funny because I kind of resonate with that one, although I resonated with the other two as well. So the next one is going to be fear of abandonment. So this is a deep-seated fear of being alone or rejected, drives their need to please and to caretake. I think that one's pretty interesting, and it makes sense because I definitely feel like I knew that I always felt the need to please and caretake for my partner, even though she was constantly saying that I wasn't, right? But it's just really kind of funny looking back, and when you really understand this stuff. So the next one is going to be low self-esteem. The sense of self-worth is often derived from external validation and being needed by others, which is what I had, and something that I still kind of, I'm way better now. I don't have low self-esteem no more, which is a good thing. But it was something that I really battled for a long time, and I would say that this is one that can kind of still creep up, after you have, even when you have a good self-esteem. I feel like this one can still creep up in different ways in different areas, right? The next one is going to be taking responsibility for others. So this is going to be feel responsible for others' feelings, actions, and outcomes, kind of like how I talked about a little bit earlier. The next one is difficulty identifying own feelings. May struggle to recognize or express their own emotions and needs. I definitely have had a problem with that, where my therapist would ask me, how do you feel? Or like, what do you feel? Like, and then I have this thing with emotional intelligence where I've learned basically how to deal with my emotions and understand them. But part of that process is you have to actually label them very specifically, not just sad or mad or happy. They got to be like specific. So, and if you're interested in that, I have a video of that up. It's called What is Emotional Intelligence? And that can teach you everything you need to know about how to deal with your emotions. And that's typically, that's in particularly important for people like us, abuse victims, trauma survivors, um, because usually after these highly toxic relationships, our emotional state is just left in shambles, and we have a very extremely hard time being able to control our emotions. And I think that video would be very helpful. I know that I'm like shooting you guys little video, like other videos that I did, because they're helpful. They're packed with information and knowledge, and they're definitely helpful for anybody that's going through that right now. Next tendency is going to be attraction to needy people. So can be drawn to people who are emotionally unavailable, troubled, or dependent. All of us. And it makes sense. I was attracted to somebody who was needy. They needed to be validated all the time, even more so that I couldn't even provide enough support, so it's needed admiration all the time, and it's just so interesting. Like, I was attracted to somebody that was so needy, you know what I mean? So if you're attracted to needy people, you might be a codependent. You might have to look more into it. So the next one is fixing and rescuing. Feel compelled to fix others' problems and rescue them from their difficulties. It's kind of interesting because I never really noticed this about me until I was in the toxic relationship. And to me, I kind of just looked at it as, hey, this is my partner. I love this person, and I'm going to do what I can to be there for them, take care of them, and make them, make sure that they're good. I've always looked at it like that. My empathy and just my kindness and my good heart. But you got to understand, man, some people do take advantage. And also, you got to also understand, is that more of a fixing and rescuing type of trait, right? So the next one is going to be blurred boundaries. Difficulty distinguishing their feelings and responsibilities from those of others. Definitely have a problem with that. It's something that I could go on until midnight and talk to you about. But this video is already 20 minutes, so I'm just going to keep it pushing. All right, so that is the list right there of all of the traits that would basically make somebody codependent or deem them codependent. So if you have those, then you are more than likely codependent if you exhibit a lot of those traits. The next question is the most important one, in my opinion. Can codependency be fully overcome? I think you would be shocked and very happy to know that yes, it can. It absolutely can. And it's possible to heal from and overcome codependency. It's a journal that requires self-awareness, commitment, and often professional support, aka therapy. But significant and lasting change is achievable. It says fully overcoming it might look like developing a strong sense of self-worth, independent of others, establishing healthy boundaries with ease, prioritizing one's own needs, and engaging with respectful and balanced relationships. That's what it would look like. And it says, although the ingrained patterns may surface occasionally, they may be recognized and managed with healthy coping skills. Basically, like what I do. Basically, like what I was saying earlier. You know, there's, I know I'm not perfect. I've done a lot of work on myself and I still do work on myself. But at the end of the day, I understand that ingrained patterns from childhood that I'm used to doing my whole life are going to come up, and it is my responsibility to now be aware of that and move accordingly, and that's what you can do. Last thing I wanted to talk about is the ways to overcome codependency. Thought I was just gonna let y'all out without finding a way to overcome this stuff. Man, get out of here, man. I'm here. I'm trying to help you guys out here, man. It would be unprofessional of me and inconsiderate if I did not give you ways to overcome codependency. All right, y'all. So let's get into it. So the first one is going to be therapy/counseling. Y'all, most of you guys already know how I feel about the therapy thing. It's like, I can't recommend it more than anything, working with a therapist specialized in codependency and trauma can provide invaluable support, guidance, and tools for healing. Invaluable. That's all you need to know. So look into it and look into those specific therapists. And if you're on a higher tax bracket, you can also look into therapists that have experience in narcissistic abuse, right? The next is going to be setting healthy boundaries. This is not this isn't a surprise, you know what I mean? Learning to say no, assert your needs, and protect your time and energy. This is very, very crucial right here. Very crucial. The next is going to be focus on self-care, prioritizing your own physical, emotional, and mental well-being. I've talked about that a lot, got videos on that. Developing a strong sense of self. So this is exploring your own interests, values, and identity outside of your relationships with others. Notice, I didn't say with your partner or your intimate person or whatever. This is with any and everybody. What are your values, interests, things of that nature, that are yours, things that you're interested in, without the influence of others? That one's pretty important right there. Next one is practicing self-compassion. So being kind and understanding to yourself during the healing process. I say it a lot, in every video I say to have self-compassion and with this healing stuff. It's a journey. It's not straight up or straightforward. There's obstacles, there's setbacks, and just thrive in those times, and have faith and just be happy that you're still on the up and up and on the right path. The next one is detaching with love. So learning to care about others without taking responsibility for their problems or trying to control their lives. Detaching with love, it's like, hey, I'm going to detach, and not with hate or not with spite, but it's all good. It's all love over here, no problems this way. And you'd be surprised how much wonders that would actually do, you know, to speed up your healing process. Building healthy support systems, very important. Connecting with friends, support groups, or communities where you feel seen, validated for who you are, and valued. That is like so important, especially coming from a place where many of us are used to coming from unhealthy family dynamics. So we're generally accepting of more toxic or unhealthy family dynamics as we get older. So it's very, very important to start establishing and maintaining healthy relationship dynamics. And that's going to look like support groups, communities, friends, family. It could be therapy. It could be religious places, anywhere where you feel valued and validated. The next is going to be learning to identify and express emotions. So paying attention to your emotions and finding healthy ways to communicate them. I talked a little bit about that earlier, so I'm not going to drag on more. I think I kind of addressed that enough. So I'm going to move on to the next one. This is going to be the last one. Also very important. And it's challenging negative thought patterns. Identifying and reframing the beliefs that drive codependent behaviors. I mean, this is it's challenging the negative patterns that you're used to thinking like. And it's not just challenging them, it's recognizing, hey, this is a negative thought pattern that is like driving codependency, and it's reframing it and actually changing it. And you might be like, oh, well, that's kind of dumb, what's that gonna do? Well, what happens is over time your brain becomes accustomed to thinking this way, and it actually rewires your way of thinking. And this is the rewiring, this is the work being done on to answer the question earlier when I asked, can codependency be overcame? This is that process right here, the rewiring, the way that you look at it, right? So this was really a really cool video. Like, it turned out to be a lot more cool than I really thought it would be. You know what I mean? Really interesting video to talk about. I knew it was something that I was going to address eventually, and I'm glad that I addressed it today. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on codependency. Is this something that you struggled with in the past? Is it something you're still going through, still struggling with? Let me know in the comments. If you guys enjoyed this video or enjoy this content, I ask that you consider subscribing and helping me get to 100K plus. I'm trying to get this content. The main goal is to get this content spread out further beyond as far as it can go. All my viewers and audience can resonate with it, learn from it, and it can be up for anybody that needs the help. Thank you guys for supporting me and walking with me on this journey. I hope that you guys are taking good care of your guys' selves, eating healthy, exercising daily, journaling, practicing radical self-care, radical acceptance, and the whole nine. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. I'll see you guys in the next video. Good night.